Welcome to The Burn, Beyond Firestop. I'm your host, John Zalepka. Our show is focused on life safety and code compliance in the built environment, which puts me on a mission to find the most interesting people in this space and get their unique perspectives. Our hope is that our listening audience walks away with an understanding of how our guests and their businesses also contribute to the promotion of life safety of whatever is being built. Now, our show, as always, is brought to you by Specified Technologies, also known as STI Firestop. And since 1990, STI has been a leading global provider of innovative fire protective solutions that help stop the spread of fire, smoke, and hot gases. Now, our guest today is the official spokesperson for the modular construction industry. He's been involved in leadership roles in modular construction since 2004 when he was named Executive Director for the Modular Building Institute. Please welcome Tom Hardiman. Hello, Tom.
Hey, John, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Appreciate you taking some time out and getting on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me on as a guest.
For sure. Now, I don't know if you've listened to the show, but I always like to start on a personal note rather than jumping into the whole business of things. So I'd like to take you back all the way to the 20th century, if you will. Huntington, West Virginia, Marshall University.
Oh, yes.
So after doing a little bit of digging on LinkedIn and some cross-referencing on some dates, it looks like you might have just missed the future Hall of Fame wide receiver Randy Moss on campus tearing up the gridiron for the Thundering Herd.
I missed him on campus, but I saw many of his games, almost every home game, and he had another pro quarterback, Mr. Chad Pennington, throwing the ball to him quite often. So those were the glory years for Marshall football.
I imagine it must have been a really exciting time on campus. I bet it brought you back many a times, like you said. What were you involved in while you were at school? Any sports, football, anything like that yourself?
Not really. I'm not a typical college kid. I grew up in Huntington, so I literally lived at home. So Marshall was my hometown school. Not real involved in the whole campus activity. Just went there, got my degree, worked, got out of town.
Yeah, well, I saw that you stuck around for your MBA, so that's pretty significant. Did you always have a sense of what you'd wind up doing now, or were you kind of like most business students and you're like, I'll figure that out eventually?
I had no clue. I was nearly a senior, and I said, I have no idea what I want to do with my life. But it worked out well. Association management, nonprofit management lets me do a little bit of management, marketing, finance, accounting, a little bit of everything on a daily basis. So that's great. And, I've got to thank Marshall because that's where I met my awesome wife, Leslie, and my daughter is now a freshman at Marshall. So, we're Thundering Herd people all the way.
Awesome. That's great. You mentioned the association management, but before that, I see that you were helping small businesses and entrepreneurs as a director at Small Business Development Center. Is that kind of what led you into what you're doing now?
A little bit, yeah. I've always had this passion for entrepreneurs and small business owners. I was in banking and insurance, and then I've probably written 150, 200 business plans and financial loan packages and back in my earlier years. So always interested in trying to help particularly small businesses.
Sure. And so I guess that's what you are now, an advocate for those businesses. I had to look up the letters after your name, Certified Association Executive, CAE.
Yeah, you've done your homework.
I've done. I have to, and you're great with posting on LinkedIn, so I appreciate all the information there. It makes getting these questions together very easy. But I guess going back to that, you were the director of the Associated Builders Contractors first. So what led you into the world of construction? I know you said you always find your way somehow, right?
Yeah, I was working in that small business consulting role, and this opportunity in West Virginia came open for director of the Associated Builders and Contractors, which is a construction trade group. I've got brothers in the construction business, but I'm not one of those that's very handy when you get on site. I'm better at being the advocate for the issues than actually doing the work. So that was an interesting 4 or 5 years of my life. At the time, West Virginia was not quite as pro-business as it is now. And let's just say Associated Builders and Contractors, for your listeners that know, have they have a merit shop philosophy, which sometimes puts you on the opposite side of the table with some organized labor groups, which it did with me at the time. And around 2004, my wife and I, we just had our daughter. We decided it was time for a change, and we looked at what opportunities were near Huntington because a lot of our family's there. and landed in Charlottesville, Virginia, with the Modular Building Institute. So it's worked out great since then, and we love it here. And so far, so good. 18 years later.
Awesome. So what did you know about modular at the time? I mean, in fact, let's start with, I guess, the most basic of questions. What is modular construction for someone who doesn't really know it?
Well, that's the good place to start. When they hired me, I knew very little about modular construction. I knew how to be an advocate for an industry and issues, and probably more importantly, I was I don't know, smart enough or humble enough to listen to the industry veterans as they helped guide me along those early years. Modular construction, really in its basic form, what we're talking about is a process where you're constructing a building or a home in an off-site factory in modules, volumetric six-sided modules. Those boxes coming out of the factory, transport them to the site, and then you assemble them on the site to make the final home or building, if you will. The term off-site is a little confusing. It encompasses a lot of other forms of construction, panelized, precast concrete, but here at MBI, we're talking about volumetric modular boxes, if you will, coming out of the factory.
So now I understand there's two main types of modular. You have your permanent modular construction and your relocatable buildings, your RBs. Now, I understand why relocatable buildings would have to be built off-site, but what are some of the benefits why someone might choose to build off-site for a permanent structure?
Great question. The main advantage is the shortened construction schedule, the speed to occupancy. And if you think about it, you're working on your site, on your foundations, in a traditional construction process. Once your site is ready, you start your construction of your building. With off-site construction, it allows you to have basically two construction sites working simultaneously. So your foundation's ready, you can have your building modules substantially complete in the factory. You schedule the delivery and the install and the crane setup, and you can have a 4, 5, 6-story building under roof within a week. Now, there's a lot of site work to be done, there's a lot of finish work, but nonetheless, you can get several stories under roof within a week because you're doing this concurrent construction process. So speed is the big advantage. That's the big driver. But there are a ton of other benefits with modular. Much less material waste going to our landfills using this process. And that's simply because the modular manufacturer, they're ordering materials, they're putting it into this building module. Whatever doesn't get used, they're putting it back on their shelves for inventory for a later project or making the module more robust. It's not going to the landfill like you see on a lot of typical construction sites. So material waste reduction, speed, worker safety is one we don't talk about a lot.
Well, let's talk about it. This is life safety. So
yeah, I mean,
this is a perfect
huge.
segue.
We're basically taking the construction site and shifting it to an indoor controlled factory setting. You're building the first floor of the building on a factory floor. You're building the 10th floor on a factory floor. You've virtually eliminated fall protection risks, which is one of the biggest risks in the construction industry. You've almost taken that out of the equation by shifting the construction to an indoor factory floor. So that's huge. And just the, convenience and logistics of workers showing up at the same manufacturing facility week after week. Again, a controlled setting. They're not outside in inclement weather, hanging off the side of a building, not knowing where next week's job's going to take them. It just makes for a more stable workforce, a more reliable workforce, and one that tends to stick around a little longer than you would maybe in traditional construction. So worker safety, material waste reduction, and speed are the big drivers.
Oh, great answers. Great answers. So, I mean, I see signs on job sites all the time. Everyone has the right to go home at the end of the day. So that's terrific that you can control that in such a controlled environment. But what about when they're being put together? I mean, I imagine they're going to different jurisdictions, which are probably all based on the IBC, the model building codes. So in what ways can you ensure that the life safety is met in those cases?
Yeah, another good question. So you're right. It's typically the IBC, and even though it's built in a factory, and that factory may be in another state, and sometimes that factory is in another country, it still has to meet the local building codes where the building will be the final building site. So if that's in Texas, it's got to meet the Texas building codes. If that's in New York City, it's got to meet the New York City building codes. So there's no getting around the building code by using modular. We have to build to the same code. It's just a different process. Typically, how that happens, how we ensure a safe code compliant building is one of two ways. Several states have their own modular administrative programs, 36 states, in fact, and they set out the rules for how we're going to inspect a modular building, how we're going to verify the quality control, things like that. They either do that with their own internal staff at the state level, or they outsource that to independent third-party engineers and inspection agencies. And then it's the manufacturer that has to coordinate. I've got an independent third party, say for the state of Virginia accepts that third party's stamped set of plans. So you just follow the state protocols. But what you end up with is a building process that really has more oversight than conventional construction, because you have state level oversight as well as the local jurisdiction. So the second part of that is really only about half of the total construction project occurs in the factory. The rest of it is site built, the foundations, utility hookups, the connections of the mods. That is the local code officials' jurisdiction, if you will. So there's still a coordination and integration between who has oversight over what's happening on site versus off site. It does require a good bit of communication and coordination on the front end for a successful modular project.
So how can people find out how to best communicate and coordinate? Is that something that they would look into the Modular Building Institute to help them?
That would be the easiest way. We've had companies from overseas say, we want to build for the U.S. And we say, which state? And they're like, no, the whole country. And we're saying, no. There's 50 states. There's 36 different regulatory programs that you're going to have to understand and register with and get approved by. And then there's 14 states that don't have a program that you're kind of at the mercy of the local building code official. So it's a little tricky to navigate the regulatory map if you're not familiar with this industry. That's a lot of what our trade association does. We have great relationships with these agencies. If someone's new to it, or really what happens a lot of times is one of our members will call and say, I'm having difficulty in this jurisdiction. The local code official is pushing back and won't let me deliver my modules. We get involved and talk to the local code official, the state program. A lot of times it's just the matter that the local does not understand the modular process or doesn't realize there's a state oversight. And it's just a matter of education and communication by and large. But it's not easy if you're new to it. So I would highly recommend reach out to us and we can help navigate that path and make it much smoother.
Great, yeah. So I was going to ask, you mentioned awareness of the different laws and codes and standards in these different states. And has that been the challenge over the years that you've been involved with the Institute, is pushing that awareness and getting the different states to adopt these measures?
Yeah, that's probably been the biggest barrier to greater adoption. Two things. One is the code officials, lack of understanding, I guess, is a fair way to put it. And I'm not intending that as a slight to them, but there's a lot of them that they don't have a lot of modular projects in their jurisdiction, so they're just not familiar with it. The word modular is not in the building code anywhere. So it's just this thing that falls between the gaps in a lot of cases. So that's part of it. And then the perception of modular. When I started, that was the biggest challenge. It was people heard the word modular, and in their mind, they pictured mobile home, trailer. That was what their picture was in their mind. And we're like, no, That's not what it is. We're talking about a construction process: wood, steel, concrete. Um, you can build 10 stories, you can build 20 stories. There's one in England that's 44-story modular building right now. So it's just a different mindset on how to build a building. But those have historically been the challenges, is that perception of what modular is. It's cheaper, which is, lower quality, which is a total falsehood. And then the code official misunderstanding or lack of understanding. That's, again, kind of our role here at MBI, is that outreach and education piece.
Awesome. And now you also are the executive director for the Modular Home Builders Association. Is that more of a contractor type of an association?
Yeah, that's correct. In 2012, MBI, Modular Building Institute, primarily commercial markets, education, office, retail, healthcare, multifamily. The modular home builders is single family modular industry. So it's the manufacturers and home builders in that group. And I've been the director there for 10 years now. Different building codes, different marketing. You're marketing to, mom and pop that want to build a home versus, McDonald's that wants to build 100 franchises. So there's a reason to keep them two separate trade organizations, but they are under the same staff and management team, kind of running parallel paths, if you will.
That sounds like you have your hands full then. So is that what led you to start your company, Hardiman Williams? And I see you offer a lot of services for association management, performance efficiency, and things like that for other nonprofits.
Yeah, boy, you really did your homework.
I told you I did.
So I was hired as the director of MBI, the Modular Building Institute, in 2004. And then around 2012, we realized there's a lot of other opportunities out here that the MBI board of directors said, we're not interested in pursuing residential or other forms of offsite. We're commercial modular. And that's good. That's good that they stay focused on that. So we worked with the board and said, what if we created this new business model? Let us form our own management company, contract back with you for your services, but then let us go pick up the residential group and start developing these offsite construction expos that we've been doing. And that's worked out well for all parties. So we're able to really put a lot of the offsite construction umbrella under the same management team, so that we're, knowledge sharing and best practices. And when we have an issue that it affects both, we're able to hire a lobbyist or an attorney and share the costs between the two organizations. So that's the big benefit of having that independent management company, is you can learn from each of the other organizations. You can share resources when needed, and help grow the industry faster.
Kaizen, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Now, you mentioned the off-site construction expos. Do you have any of those scheduled yet this year? How can people sign up or learn about those?
We do. They tend to be regional events. We've got 3 scheduled for this year. So excited to be back in person this year. We had to do some digital ones the last couple of years. Sacramento in June. We're going to be doing one in Washington, D.C. in August, and then Denver in September. Those are one-day shows. We have typically 25 to maybe 30 regional exhibitors, and they are providers of off-site solutions: modular, prefab, panelized, precast concrete. Those are the exhibitors. Typically have 6 case study or panel presentations, and then the audience are owner, developers, architects, contractors who want to learn more about this. So it's really kind of a one-day crash course that we can bring these people in and say, here's 6 presentations, here's all the providers in your region, have at it. So we're doing 3 of those this year. We expect good crowds at all 3 of them. Sacramento's probably going to be pretty heavily focused on the housing market, because that's a huge opportunity out there. But we're also looking at things, and no surprise, disaster and emergency relief. Our industry is fantastic at providing quick space. We had a lot of that during COVID, and now there's this discussion or interest or even really pressure to, how do we provide housing for, millions of Ukrainian refugees that are just with nowhere to go. So we've got about 25 European members in MBI, and we're talking about ways that our industry can, step up and help with that crisis as well. So, ton of opportunities out there. It's exciting times.
So, sure. Tom, do you want to plug how someone could sign up for the Offsite Construction Expo, or maybe even to find out more about what you were just saying, your involvement with the Ukraine?
Yeah, it's the offsiteconstructionexpo.com, and then everything's there. We've got case studies. We've got 5 trade associations actually support this offsite construction page, and they're all listed there, and you can learn more about them. I got all of our events there. We've done some video interviews that posted there. So offsiteconstructionexpo.com, or just tom@modular.org is my email, and I'm still old school email guy rather than text. So
that's great.
Shoot me an email.
So let's talk about the big one, Tom. World of Modular. We have the event coming up in San Antonio, April 25th to the 28th, I believe. STI is going to be there. We'll be at booth 427, shameless plug right there.
No, that's great.
Why don't you tell everybody a little bit about what they can expect at the World of Modular?
Well, thank you. World of Modular is the biggest and longest running conference for modular construction. And again, we're talking about volumetric modular construction. The whole industry gets together. We typically have around 1,000 attendees at these events. When I started, we had 300, 400 people, and it was a great show. But now it's grown. The biggest growth in our attendees is actually owners, developers, architects, contractors, traditional construction people wanting to learn more about modular. So they come to our show 4 days. It's 100% the best value if you want to go to a modular construction show. You're all in at our show. You pay, that includes all your receptions, all your open bars, breakfast. We throw a dinner in. But the real key thing about it is there are literally hundreds of decision makers walking those hallways, sitting in breakouts beside you. You could set your business up for the next 2 years just by coming to that show and talking to people. Over 100 exhibitors, including companies like yours. So it's just a great opportunity for the whole industry to get together, share best practices, learn from one another, make tremendous connections. But the best part of it for me is all the money we raise from this event gets reinvested back into our industry. So we use the proceeds from this event to do more marketing, to do more professional development, to do more lobbying. And no other show can say that. No other show. They're for-profit events. That money goes bye-bye once you leave the conference. Ours stays right here in the industry. So come to World of Modular.
Yeah. So where can they sign up for that one? Why don't you plug that link, and then we'll put them in the show notes afterwards too.
Modular.org, and there's a big old banner there for World of Modular. It's got all the details, registration, the hotel information. La Cantera Resort in San Antonio. There's a nice golf course there if that's your thing. You can, on your off days, you can hit the river walk, but it should be a beautiful resort, beautiful weather. We've got, I think 90 speakers lined up over those 3 days, 4 days. So we're bringing our whole team. We're kind of all in on this one. We've kind of made the commitment. If there is someone at that show you want to meet, my staff or I will personally introduce you to them. And I've been to a lot of trade shows, John. I know you probably have too.
Ah, that's a great guarantee right there, Tom.
Has the conference organizer ever said,
never
want to meet? I'll go introduce you.
That's
we do
terrific.
That. We'll do that.
Awesome. So, and if someone's listening in the future and they missed the show, this is an annual event as well, right?
Correct. It's annual. There is a digital portion this year. It was all digital last year, which was, it is what it is. We had to do all digital last year. We had 1,300 attendees. This year it's in person, but we will have one track. Our main track will be live broadcast, so you can at least get a taste of it if you're not able to get there in person. There will be a digital package available. But yeah, it's our annual event. It's the industry annual trade show, and should be just a fantastic event this year. We're looking forward to it.
All right, so you have no excuse. Go learn about modular. Tom, I really appreciate the time today. It was a pleasure getting to know you.
Well, John, thank you so much for having me. And again, if anyone has any questions, feel free to reach out to me.
Great. Thanks again, Tom. And we'd like to thank everyone listening in. We know that there's a lot of podcasts out there, and you've chosen to listen to ours. It's humbling, so thank you. Thank you very much. And be sure to check out the show notes to the links to some of the things to sign up, what we spoke about in the episode. And finally, if you are enjoying the show, please support the podcast. Tell a friend about it, like our posts on social media, or if you know how to leave a rating or review, I'm told it's a good thing, so please do that as well. And if you'd like to learn even more about fire stopping for modular construction, please check out our events page at STIFirestop.com. You can sign up for some upcoming webinars that we have. It's actually called Fire Stopping for Modular Construction on April 20th and May 4th. And until the next time, this is The Burn.